Tim Lotzenizer here, and welcome again to Backstage from Conn-Selmer's Division of Education. We're excited we can bring this information to you with outstanding guests, and we got a really outstanding guest today. To all you that are loyalists, thanks for coming back. To you people who are new, become one of our loyalists for sure. Today, our very special guest is Robert Morrison. Bob is the founder and the CEO of Quadrant Research. I'll let him tell you a little bit about that. Most of all, he's a person that has dedicated his entire professional pathway to music advocacy and has done it remarkably well. We are all in his debt. So, to my dear friend, Bob Morrison, what is going on your side of the mountain?
Hey, good morning, Timmer. Well, today, as the sun is rising here on the East Coast, we're working hard and getting ready to release for the state of New Jersey what we're calling our September Ready report on arts education guidance for the reopening of our schools. Schools here in New Jersey have about a month to get their plans together for how they're going to reopen, and we pulled together guidance for across all of the arts disciplines to help our educators be empowered to make a difference in the planning within their own communities so that we can ensure there's a continuity of instruction around music and arts education in all of our schools. And at the same time, we're also working with Quadrant Research on gathering data from across the country to measure the status and condition of our arts education programs at the building level so we can understand how data will change over time regarding student access to and participation in those programs. Right now, we're currently operating in about 20 states, and we hope that by the end of next year that we'll be in over 30 states, representing about 75% of the student population, and that this will give us a real barometer on the impact of COVID-19 on our program so that we can see where programs were strengthened, maybe where participation had declined, so that we can use all of our advocacy tools and resources to make sure we support those programs across the country that will need that support.
Well, first of all, you're one of the people that has stepped forward and shown all of us how important data is, that's really how decision makers leverage the direction they're going to go, and you brought forth more than anybody. Just a quick question. When you talk about how time is shifting things, a month ago, you and I were at Conn-Selmer Institute Connect. One of our keynote speakers did a knock it out of the park job, as always. What has changed in those 4 weeks from then until now? Because a lot has shifted, my friend.
Well, the world has changed, and continues to change in those 4 weeks. And as I look at it, we measure time during COVID-19 in dog years. One day is a week, 1 week is a month, 1 month is a year. And Conn-Selmer Connect was a month ago, which feels like it was a year ago. And in that time, a lot has changed. We know more about what our states are advising in their reopening plans. We only had a handful of states back at CSI Connect, and now the vast majority of our states have released their school reopening guidelines. So we know more about what state plans look like. And we also know more about the stubbornness of this virus. Back in early June, everyone was expecting, states were planning, for their fall reopening, sports and everything else. And now we're seeing states pull back from their guidance, and rehearsals are being, pulled back, and athletic events are being pulled back, and universities are now going online in many instances. So what we thought was going to happen a month ago looks very different from what we see today.
Yeah, it certainly does. If you were giving advice, and I mean, you and I have spent our lives talking about the importance of communication, developing relationships, and how this network works in our favor, or if we don't, works against us sometimes. What advice would you give to all of our watchers right now, what they could actually do at this point that would have a positive impact regardless what happens in the future?
Well, I think that the thing that they need to know is to be prepared, right? The thing that they need to focus on is being prepared. We know that most schools are going to open in some sort of hybrid model, where you're in person for part of the time and that you're in a remote learning for part of the time. So you need to prepare your lesson plans around that if they apply to you in that circumstance. But we also need to prepare to be fully remote at any given time. And we had a 3-month dress rehearsal on this. So there's a lot of things that we learned in that process that we can apply now. But really what folks should be doing now is first and foremost to talk to your administrators. You have to be in communication with your direct supervisor, your art supervisor, or your district superintendent, depending on the size of your school district, to get an understanding of A, what are they thinking about for reopening plans, and then B, to volunteer to be on those reopening plan committees. Most schools are developing committees to help figure out how they're going to reopen once September arrives or August in certain parts of the country. And you should volunteer to be on there so that you can help develop the plans for the entire school district, but also be there as a voice representing music and arts education so that you can show them that regardless of the scenario that they're going to put in place, that arts education, music education can be provided successfully for all students, and that it needs to be provided for all students because the important role that music plays in the engagement of our students. But in addition to that, start thinking about what can you do now to modify things in your own environment. So assuming that students will come back in some capacity, what does that mean for your music room? What does social distancing mean for the number of students that you can see in your music room? Maybe the music room isn't enough. Maybe you need to rehearse in the auditorium. So you need to work with your administration to say, hey, I need more space so we can accommodate more students. And since we're not using the auditorium for anything else, we can have our instrumental music program in there. We can have our vocal music program in there. So look at things that you can do now to make things better for when your students come in. What are the protocols you have to put in place for, no longer being able to share instruments? And what do your percussionists need to do, when they're playing on different instruments? And what do you need to do for background instruments that have to be shared? And how do you clean them and treat them in between sessions when students are using them? Reviewing what worked and what didn't work over the past 3 months so that you can bring those plans into your future planning. Network with your peers to find out what they did well and how that may impact what you want to do within your own community. Develop that remote learning plan. You're going to need it because at some point in time, we very likely will be entirely remote again. And you want to make sure that you have a plan in place to be able to make that switch right away. Embed social emotional learning. We've talked about this at CSI Connect. It is true today. SEL is a priority for all of our school administrators. And we know that there is inherent SEL aspects in what we do in music, but we have to be knowledgeable about them. We have to be intentional about them. So learn about it and see how you can embed SEL intentionally in the work that you do. And then activate your parents and supporters. Let them know what you're doing. Let them know the work that you've been doing. Find ways to showcase student work. Regardless of you can't bring them on a stage necessarily, there are other ways to showcase what your students have been doing and plan for alternative ways to showcase your students in the fall. And then last but not least, make sure you provide an opportunity to listen to student voice and engage student voice in your work. Allow them to speak out on behalf of the program. What does music mean to them? What is it that they've missed about not being together with their friends? And what is it that they want people to know about why music is so important to them? So these are some things that very easily educators can begin to do now while we wait for additional information and guidance and planning for what the fall may look like in our individual districts. But one thing is clear. No two districts are going to look alike. This is all going to be driven by what I call a three-dimensional chess game of trying to figure out facilities and square footage and how many students can we put in here and what's the size of our school and how many students do we have in our districts and how big are our faculty and what percentage of our faculty are not coming in. I mean, there are a lot of different complicating factors that are going to make each individual school and district look different, and their approach is going to be different. So you have to do the work and get the information so that you can be empowered to figure out what's going to be the best strategy for you. And there's a lot of resources and information out there. Certainly a ton of it was available at CSI Connect, and I know is available, through ConSelmer and through the other national associations. It's there for you to use.
That's great. Bob, as always, you've given us a treasury of actual things we can do, pragmatic things. So
One last thing.
Friend. You go.
The one thing that we learned this fall or this spring is that there's a lot of great things that we can do online, and a lot of great things that we can do with music education remotely. But there's one thing that we can't do remotely, and that's play together. We can't play together remotely. And so in whatever hybrid model that exists, when you have your students together, you have to play. That has to be the priority. That has to be the number one thing, whether it's 2 students, or 4 students, or 8 students, or a dozen students, doesn't matter however many you have in front of you in a classroom, you have to play, because when we're remote, you can't play together. And that's the thing that our students are telling us over and over and over and over that they miss the most, is the ability to play together.
That's why we do it in the first place, so we can make music. Thank you so much, Bob. And again, you're the gold standard for all of us. We're all trying to keep up with you, and you continue to give us good fuel to do it with. Each and every one of you, thanks for being here. Thanks for joining my good friend, Bob Morrison. And most of all, take care of yourself and your families. Bob, best love to your family. Grab a hunk for yourself. We'll see you next time at Backstage. Thank you.
Thank you, Timur.
Thank you.